simple text today, right? Be perfect. Tommy, check it off the list. What I thought was interesting for us to talk about tonight is kind of the arguments that happen about what that line means, be perfect as God is perfect. And some people kind of just throw it out and just say, it didn't mean perfect, because no one can be perfect. God would never ask us to be perfect. What it really means is to be whole with a W and holy with an H. So that probably was something created by people who either work really hard to be perfect all of the time, and it creates anxiety in their life, and they want God not to be commanding them to continue that behavior. Or people who think they could never possibly live up to that. It's a great idea because it means that we're supposed to do good things for ourselves. We're supposed to have self-care, go to Hawaii. It says that in the Bible. That we're supposed to do things that will take care of our whole selves. And if you think about it in comparison to the part about, like, if someone takes out your eye, pluck out their eye, like, if you think of the message being that God cares about every single part of our body, and God wants us to be whole bodies, that 100% makes sense. If you forget that we live in a world with disabilities and illness and sickness in it. So, as a people who are able to acknowledge that for some of us, our best is not whole, or at least whole in that sense of what normal's supposed to be, whether it's disabilities that we have, or knees that hurt when it rains, or cognitive impairments, or addictions, or HIV or AIDS, the way that they kind of change our lives forever. I would hope that we would be a community that's encouraging the best that we can be, or the intention of community. And also hope that when we proclaim that God wants us to be whole, that it doesn't make some people feel left out who feel they could never be whole for whatever reason. But what I also want to do is to challenge you all and argue that it does mean perfect. But think about it not as perfect in human standards, like 100% on the ACT or the SAT, right? Because the text that went along with this is the 1 Corinthians text that talks about the foolishness of God is smarter than the wisest human being. So think of it not as kind of our own idea of what perfection is, whether it's doing all of our chores when we should, or what our boss at work thinks we should do, or getting an A+ at school, or even sitting when we're supposed to. But I want to challenge you to think about the whole story of the Bible, because I think it tells us that God's perfection is creating people and screwing it up and having to start it again, having to bring a big flood because the people ended up being a way you didn't want them to be. Think of all of the stories of people not listening to God that God created. And think about the most perfect plan ever, the story of Jesus. If the perfectness of God depends on killing God's own son on a cross for us to be seen as perfect in God's eyes, I'm a pretty humble person, but that kind of perfection I can achieve. The kind of perfection that's a little bit out there, kind of in everyday standards, and maybe that doesn't look the way that we would have planned it. So, what I'm thinking is that probably there are some of us who need to be more perfect, and some of us who are a little too perfect. And that causes us anxiety, and we need to stop being perfect. There are some of us who need to be more holistic in our thinking, or taking care of all the parts of our body. And there are some of us who need to work on being more holy. And maybe that's having more time for prayer and for our spiritual life. So I just want to lift that up for our conversation, for people to talk about kind of whatever springs out of that. But even if you don't say anything out loud, think through this next week. what's something that I can do to help myself in that one area? Whether it's, if I need to be more holy, maybe I'll try to pray or think about God. Whatever it is to be more holy for you. If I need to be more whole, maybe I'll go to a spa. That would be really horrible homework for the rest of the week. Or if it's being more perfect, maybe it's whatever it is. Making our bed each week. Whatever it is that thing we need to work on. What do you think?